China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Ukraine calls for the reopening of grain export routes after Poland and Hungary block shipments, and Slovakia says it will follow suit. Almost 100 now dead as fighting rages in Sudan, and the military government outlaws the RFS paramilitary group. And a French court acquits Air France and Airbus in a trial over the 2009 crash of a Rio to Paris flight that killed 228 people. Ukraine is calling for the reopening of food and grain transit via Poland in talks being held in Warsaw. Poland and Hungary have banned some Ukrainian imports to protect their own local agricultural markets. Slovakia says it will now follow suit, but the European Commission rejects the bans, saying unilateral moves on trade policy by member states will not be tolerated. Let's go live now to Alex Cadier, our correspondent in Brussels. So, Alex, this ban from Poland and Hungary seems to have caught Brussels off guard. Now Slovakia wants to do the same.
Yeah, it's been an issue that's been discussed for a while by these neighbouring countries to Ukraine. They've been concerned that those solidarity lanes implemented by the European Union back in May, which are effectively trade routes, new trade routes through rail, through road, to be able to allow Ukraine to ship products out and also other countries to ship products in. Obviously, a no-fly zone over Ukraine and the east of the country independent or not being able to be have cargo shipped through. That made Ukraine's economy very much vulnerable to Russia's invasion of the country. So the European Union stepping in, allowing for solidarity lanes, but that grain was supposed to be able to go through the EU to other countries, to other markets. In fact, some of it has found itself on the EU market, flooding local markets. So Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, all having their farmers threatened by this transport of grain. To give you a sense, Ukraine has about twice as much agricultural land as the biggest land surface in the EU, which will be for France. So there's a really big market there. This has been a bit of a domino effect. We had a statement from the Bulgarian agriculture minister saying that they have to preserve Bulgarian interests, and if two other EU countries, in this case Hungary and Poland, are putting these bans in place, we have to do the same, or else the accumulation in Bulgaria is going to get worse. So you can imagine that will be a similar reasoning for the Slovakian government and the Romanians also looking at this issue very closely. Now the Commission, as you said, has responded by saying, well, look, this is not a kind of decision that we make individually as member states. This is a decision made as a broad European Union level. Let's have a listen to what the trade spokesperson for the European Commission had to say earlier today.
Trade policy is of exclusive competence, which means that it's at European Union level that such decisions can be taken, and that's why we have been saying that unilateral action is not possible under EU trade policy.
Alex, does the issue really lie with maintaining safe grain routes across the Black Sea?
Well, there's no direct link. These are two separate arrangements for Ukrainian grain to be able to cross out, or get out of the country and prevent really a food crisis around the world, particularly in developing nations. The Black Sea grain deal brokered by the United Nations, these solidarity lanes are a European Union project. But what is clear is that if both of these routes collapse at the same time, we've seen Kyiv warning that because Russia has not allowed inspections on certain ships, the whole deal could collapse. The Kremlin, meanwhile, saying there wasn't a particularly bright prospect of the deal being renewed. That could mean that on the one hand you have opposition from European Union member states to Ukrainian grain heading out west. You also have the potential of Ukrainian grain not being able to leave the country from the south. So yes, there would be a huge impact for the Ukrainian economy that links these two routes, but also a massive impact for the rest of the world that desperately needs that grain. So really quite a global situation that could evolve out of these two situations. We know the European Commission is going to be in talks with those member states later this week. An unnamed EU official saying that those talks will take place this week, and if those member states do not resolve this issue, they can expect a response from the European Commission.
Alex Cadier in Brussels, thank you. A leading opposition figure in Russia has been jailed for 25 years for comments he made over the conflicts in Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza, a former journalist with dual Russian-British citizenship, has been found guilty of treason. Prosecutors had accused him of spreading what they say is false information about the Russian army's actions in Ukraine. He denies the charges. Our correspondent Stuart Smith is in Moscow for us now. Stuart, what are the allegations against Kara-Murza?
Well, this all started around a year ago when he was initially arrested for disobeying the orders of a police officer. But once in jail, the charges started to pile on. Initially over his cooperation with what Russia calls an undesirable organisation, which means an NGO or foreign organisation which is illegal to associate with here in Russia. Then his charges were added. The charges were increased to also, and I quote, dissemination of knowingly false information about the actions of the Russian armed forces. The investigative committee here in Russia says he was driven by moral hatred and was using the content of his speeches at the US House of Representatives in Arizona to make claims about the Russian armed forces which were not true. And then on top of that, the big one, he was charged with treason, again for the content of speeches he made to NATO, to the Helsinki Committee and other speeches in the United States. He denies all of those charges and says that his prosecution is politically motivated.
So very serious charges. What happens to him now?
Yeah, so first of all, his lawyers say they will appeal, but it's not clear whether that means he'll stay in Moscow or move immediately to the prison colony, which the prosecution said he should go for 25 years. The judges agreed, and as well as that 25-year prison sentence and a very strict penal regime, he'll also need to pay a fine of $5,000 and will be banned from undertaking journalism for 7 years after his release. In terms of his prospects for appeal, it's unlikely that he will be freed just on precedent based on similar cases. It's unlikely that will go through, but he does have that opportunity and his lawyers say they are going to take it. One other concern, though, for him is his health. The defence said during the hearing that he does have a serious medical condition, a nerve disease, most likely, his defence believes, due to the 2 times he was poisoned while undertaking opposition activities. And that is something that has led him to lose 20 kilograms, according to his defence, over the past year in prison, and does mean he is in danger of dying should he go to prison.
And what has there been in terms of response in Russia to his jailing?
Well, a number of notable opposition figures, highly respected journalists and also politicians of the opposition kind have come out and said that they believe this is an extension of repressive policies by the current Russian government. They say that he should be freed. There's also been reaction from a number of foreign embassies calling for his release. Just before he was sentenced, a note appeared via his lawyers on social which has been taking place under closed rules. So that was the only way we got an insight into what has been going on. One of the statements he said was that he believed that he understood he did everything right by that 25-year sentence. He said it's the highest score I could have got for what I did, for what I believed in as a citizen and as a patriot.
Stuart, thanks so much for that update. Stuart Smith in Moscow. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has been holding talks in Moscow with China's Defence Minister Li Shangfu. Both men hailed their countries' close military ties. President Putin says Russia and China were exchanging information and taking part in joint exercises involving ground, naval and air forces. The meeting kicked off Li's 4-day trip to Russia. He said ties with Russia had entered an era that were very stable. Iran has officially invited Saudi Arabia's king to visit the country. The invitation comes after the regional rivals agreed to end years of hostility following a China-brokered agreement in March. Technical delegations from both countries are preparing to officially reopen their missions, which Tehran says will reopen by May the 9th. At least 12 people have died from sunstroke after attending an awards ceremony in India's Maharashtra state. Hundreds of thousands of people attended the government-sponsored function on Sunday for 5 hours in the blazing sun. Temperatures reached 38 degrees Celsius. Dozens of other people were also hospitalised. Air France and Airbus have been acquitted on all charges related to the 2009 Rio to Paris plane crash. A French court cleared the companies of any criminal wrongdoing. 228 people died when Air France Flight 447 lost control and plunged into the Atlantic Ocean. Natalie Malhouse reports.
Over the last 9 weeks, the court in Paris heard from aviation experts, pilots, air traffic authorities and the testimonies of relatives of those who died. The case against the two aviation giants was first dismissed a decade after the air disaster, with prosecutors citing insufficient evidence to try Airbus or its operator Air France for involuntary manslaughter. Following an appeal by victims' families, the court reviewed its position. The plane's pitot probes froze over during a mid-Atlantic storm and buckled the plane's navigation system, triggering alarms in the cockpit and shutting down the autopilot function. The families believe this was a breach of safety protocols and negligent maintenance. Throughout the trial, representatives of Airbus and Air France maintained the companies weren't at fault. Instead, they blamed the pilots' poor crisis handling. The court also determined the companies weren't liable for the malfunctions and resulting deaths. Natalie Malhouse, CGTN, Paris.
Political leaders from the past and present, including Bill and Hillary Clinton, are in Belfast for a major conference, 25 years after Northern Ireland's Good Friday Agreement. George Mitchell, the former US Senator who chaired the 1998 negotiations, hailed the deal as an example to other troubled areas in the world. He urged current regional leaders not to let it slip away.
We are living in fractured times. We need you. We need your ongoing patience, stamina, and perseverance. We need people who believe, who know that the possible does exist within the impossible. Don't let it slip away.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come, 500,000 free flights to Hong Kong as the financial hub unveils a campaign to lure back visitors and investors.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail, the background,
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to The World Today. Explosions continue to rock Sudan's capital, Khartoum, as fighting between the Sudanese army and a paramilitary group rage for a third day. Sudan's army chief says the Rapid Support Forces is a rebellious organisation and has ordered for it to be disbanded. Clashes in Khartoum have killed nearly 100 people, with many more injured as intense combat continues, dashing hopes of a peaceful transition to civilian rule. Well, Sudan has had a long and bumpy journey since independence in the 1950s. CGTN correspondent Michael Voss explains the events that led up to the recent violence.
Sudan is no stranger to bloody conflict. Since independence in 1956, it suffered 2 separate civil wars and the conflict in Darfur. That's where both the current adversaries made their names. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan was the army commander in Darfur. It was also where Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, first came to prominence, leading a paramilitary group which formed the basis of today's RSF, the Rapid Support Force. The origins of the current battles go back to the overthrow in 2019 of the long-standing dictator President Bashir, following a popular uprising. General Burhan was appointed head of the Transitional Military Council, effectively the de facto ruler of Sudan. Both continued to pledge a transition to civilian rule.
This is a transitional period. We plan that it will last for 1 year only, after which political powers rule as they wish.
We want free and fair elections, and for the Sudanese people to elect whom they want.
But attempts to form a military-civilian administration on the road to a civilian government was short-lived. In 2021, a military coup removed the civilian prime minister. The military now took control, and with General Burhan looking on, the head of the paramilitary RSF, General Dagalo, was sworn in as deputy head of the Transitional Council, the effective deputy head of state. But the handshake and cooperation between the two men was short-lived. Part of the move to civilian rule involved merging the RSF with the regular army. Disagreements over how this would work and the ambitions of these two powerful military figures are behind this latest outburst of fighting. Michael Voss, CGTN.
Well, let's get the latest now live from Khartoum and Naba Mohieddin. Naba, the Rapid Support Force is being declared a rebel group by the ruling council. What importance could that have, and has there been any reaction yet?
It's important, and it's, in the same time it's escalating the language of the conflict itself, because by describing them as rebels without even giving a hand for tensions or talks, that means that they will attack more, and that is reality. Right now, Sudan is under the fire of the two generals because the Rapid Support Forces are trying to defend themselves by saying they are not rebels and they are part of the transitional period, because the Rapid Support Forces commander had played a very sensitive and a big role in ousting al-Bashir. So the man thinks he has impact in the country, and he is trying to put things back on track. On ground, this description and this by the military and the war of communiques actually is escalating the situation, and what all we see right now is explosions, bombings, and the situation is really chaotic. Despite that, there is a ceasefire for 4 hours agreed between the two sides, but still the escalation is very high, because every side is trying to prove that he is on the right side and trying to win this battle. But this battle is not cannot be won, and it's not a win-win situation. It's a lose-lose situation, because it's on the heads of innocent civilians in a country like Sudan, and in a capital that has at least 10 million people live in it.
10 million people, very concerned and worried at the moment, of course, and chaotic, you say the situation is in Khartoum, despite these humanitarian pauses. What is the humanitarian situation there where you are? We hear reports of bottled water running out.
actually, yes, the humanitarian situation is really bad, and I can't describe it enough by saying even dead bodies cannot be evacuated out of their houses and the buildings. Also, there is a lot of dead bodies in the street, and doctors and ambulances cannot even get to them. So the situation is really bad. People are stuck in their houses with no food, with no water, with no electricity. The humanitarian situation is really bad. We can say Sudan right now, or all of the Sudanese capital Sudanese people in the capital are war hostages because they can't even move. They can't even stay in their windows or roofs like I do right now. So the situation is really bad. The humanitarian situation is bad. Despite there is a ceasefire for 4 hours, but it is still risky, and there is very short aid provided by organizations. And the third thing is WFP just announced that they will suspend their operations in Sudan after their team were killed in Darfur, and their offices were looted by militias without accusing any part. So the humanitarian situation is bad, and a worse crisis is looming with WFP and UN agencies withdrawal from the scene. The country is already under very fragile economy, and people are suffering from a food crisis that affecting millions of people here. So it's a looming humanitarian crisis that needs a lot of efforts by international community and international friends, including China, US, and Western allies, to help restore calm and stability in the country again.
Well, everyone hoping for that very soon. Naba Mohideen, live from Khartoum. Stay safe. Thank you very much indeed for that update. We really appreciate it. In some other news from today's headlines, the US and South Korea and Japan have conducted joint defence exercises off the Korean peninsula after a run of nuclear missile tests by the DPRK. Last week, Pyongyang flights tested a high-grade solid fuel ballistic missile for the first time. The new harder-to-detect weapons are seen as a step forward in its goal to develop nuclear weapons that could directly threaten Western targets. On Monday, the US flew B-52 bombers to the Korean peninsula for joint aerial and naval training exercises with Seoul and Tokyo. Elon Musk's company SpaceX has postponed the debut launch of the most powerful rocket ever built, just minutes away from countdown. The towering Starship rocket was due to take off from the Gulf Coast of Texas. Musk tweeted that a pressure valve appeared to be frozen, but they'll try again in a few days. There's hopes the vehicle can eventually usher in a new era of interplanetary travel. Melbourne has overtaken Sydney as Australia's most populous city for the first time since the 19th century gold rush. It's due to urban sprawl and international migration, plus a boundary change which expanded the city limits. Latest government figures show more than 4.8 million people live in Melbourne. That's 18,000 more than in Sydney. Hong Kong's finance official Christopher Hui is on a visit to the UK to promote the city's financial services and strengthen ties. Hui is expected to introduce the latest developments in Hong Kong's fintech and green finance. It's the first ministerial level visit by an official from the Chinese territory in more than 3 years. Well, Hong Kong has unveiled a promotion campaign that will include 500,000 free flights to lure back visitors and investors as the financial hub recovers from the pandemic. Our correspondent Anne Cheng is in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong has been hosting the World of Winners campaign, in which free air tickets are given out to encourage people to travel to Hong Kong, especially following the lift of pandemic restrictions. These tickets, about 500,000 in total, are tied to local carriers Cathay Pacific, Hong Kong Express, and Hong Kong Airlines. And since March, tickets have started being distributed in different ways, like lucky draws or buy one get one free, or games. Around 135,000 tickets have been distributed to Southeast Asian tourists last month, while 140,000 tickets are allotted for travelers from the Chinese mainland. Now, from now till the end of the month, Hong Kong's flagship carrier Cathay Pacific will distribute 110,000 round-trip tickets in 2 phases. The first phase just began from Monday to Sunday. Over 80,000 tickets will be given out to lucky draw winners to fly to Hong Kong from 14 mainland cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, and Chengdu. Travelers from Shanghai will get about a quarter of that quota. As for the next phase, that's from next Monday to Sunday, and people can win tickets to travel from Hong Kong to 26 overseas destinations, including the United States, Canada, and France. According to provisional figures from the Hong Kong Tourism Board, visitor arrivals in Hong Kong exceeded 2 million in March for the first time since the pandemic began. That's about 68% more than the previous month. So the numbers do show improvement. Tourism Board Chief Dane Cheng had said a couple of weeks ago that the tourism industry is recovering, with the number of mainland tourists returning to about 45% of pre-pandemic levels, while East Asian tourists are at about 60% of pre-pandemic levels. The next big holiday would be the mainland's national holiday in May, when Hong Kong will be expecting more tourists from the mainland. And Cheng, CGTN Hong Kong.
Parts of Southeast Asia are celebrating the Buddhist New Year. In Thailand, the occasion is marked by the Songkran Festival, popular with locals and tourists, in what's known as the world's biggest water fight. Our correspondent, Dusite Sarkao, reports from Bangkok.
It's a time of cleansing and renewal, a time to reunite with family, to pay respects to elders. It's a time of tradition. Millions of Thais make their way to temples, Buddha images are bathed, and young people pour scented water onto the hands of their family elders, washing away the sins, anxieties, and discontent of the old year. Because Thais are beginning a new year, it's Songkran, also known as Thai New Year. But just outside the temple walls, the pace of ancient traditions clashes with the frenzy of modern life. It's energetic, it's wild, it's absolutely crazy.
It doesn't matter if you're on the sidewalk or in the middle of the road, you're just bound to get soaked. Welcome to the world's biggest water fight, and this year there's plenty to celebrate. After 3 years of muted festivities, Songkran is back. The water guns, the hoses, the buckets, and of course, the tourists.
Because beyond the water fights, the economics of Songkran is significant. It is one of the peak spending seasons for local and foreign tourists across Thailand. Usually a 3-day holiday has this year been extended to 5. The government hoping that extra days off will allow people to travel and boost tourism, generating around $550 million in revenue.
I think it's really, expected for the Songkran because we stopped playing Songkran for 3 years. So this year, everyone looking forward to the splash. So I think that for the nationwide, we expect that for the Thai people, about 3.8 million, nearly 4 million that we traveling around for the Songkran festival. And for the international tourists, it's about 300,000.
But in the northern city of Chiang Mai, a top tourism destination and where the usual Songkran celebrations take on a life of its own, tourism operators are holding their breath. The city has been blanketed by hazardous smog for weeks, with IQ Air ranking the province as the most polluted on Earth.
We were in Chiang Mai before, and there was a lot of pollution. So it was part of why we decided to go to Bangkok as well, because it's amazing that we finally can be outside again with each other and that we can celebrate anything. And this is a really cool festival.
Nonetheless, Thailand's tourism body has gone big, organizing a plethora of campaigns and events to make sure that everyone gets into the Songkran spirit. And with UNESCO including the Songkran Festival in its tentative list of tangible cultural heritage items, there's no denying that Songkran is back with a splash. Lucita Saokao, CGTN, Bangkok, Thailand.
And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We'll be back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, though, it's World Insights with Tian Wei.
This is CGTN.